Hi and welcome to Sparkle Chart. Hello gorgeous people! Today I'm going to be playing with some new products for Lulu Art, and they are the beautiful gem colour set from Kuretake in the Gansai Tambi watercolour range, and these things are spectacularly shimmery. So let's have a look and see what they can do. Now, I love to start off with new products by making some colour swatches, doing a few experiments and seeing how they react to different things. So today, I'm going to see how these gorgeous watercolour paints look when they're applied very in a light wash over some water, so when they're most pale. I'm going to see how they look when applied over each other. And then I'm going to see how they can look when at their most opaque. And then I'm just going to finish off the page and just have a little play and sort of see how they look together. So we have gem red, gem green, gem blue, gem yellow gold, just to be precise, gem pink and gem violet. And this is what I'm going to be playing with. So I'm going to do a few different things with them today. And basically I'm going to do a fancy colour test page, because it's really nice to know how things react before you start using them, just so that you've got a bit of an idea about how opaque the colours are, how bright, how they play together. And we'll be playing just in a watercolour or mixed media journal today. Now I'm going to start by adding a little bit of water to each of my watercolour pans. So the first thing I'm going to do is just wet the page down. So I have a nice little watercolour brush here, and I'm just going to make some just marks on the page. So the first step is just to see just how these colours play. So the water has not been sitting in there very long. So they haven't achieved that sort of syrupy kind of consistency yet. Basically, I just want to see how the colours move on paper, how they play. Ooh, that's a really deep colour. Compared to the rest, this red is just super vibrant. Let me spread that out a little. See how it plays with the gold here. Wow, the red compared to the other colours so far, just with that tiny bit of water, is like super strength. The blue and the violet are reasonably pale. The violet's making the most gorgeous patterns on the page. Getting lots and lots of separation with that violet colour. It's super pretty. Now I don't want to do too much more to it. I haven't tested the green yet. Whoops. Just have that in some little areas here. Well, that's quite pretty. This is a beautiful set. That red is like uber bright compared to the others, but the gold, the green, the blue, the mauve, even the pink, getting this beautiful pattern on the page. I haven't even done anything to it. It's just settling that way. That red is uber bright in comparison. So that's just something to know. Just in case that's not quite the look you're going for, you would need to water that down quite a bit. Just going to add a little bit of gold there and try and cover that black spot a tiny bit. Or at least make it not quite so bright. Don't you love it when ink goes straight through and bleeds onto the next project? I don't. I find that really annoying. Alright, step one, let this dry. So that is a quick colour play with the gem watercolour set. And you can see that just on this gorgeous paper, I'm getting lots and lots of separation in the colours. I'm getting lots of patterning. Haven't done anything special. There's no salt. There's no separating agent. There's nothing in here. This is just how they're reacting. And I can't wait to see what else you can do with these. All right, so the colours are dry. And they are super pretty. So when put on very minimally, without being syrupy, they are super beautiful pale, and they split. They get beautiful pattern, no salt required, looks amazing. So now it's time to see how they overlay with each other and sort of layer. So I'm going to try out these gel press plates from Lulu Art. And all right, so for the first layer, I'm going to test the opacity. So I'm going to layer the watercolors onto this little round jelly plate and just sort of see how well it covers the colors underneath. So I might just go with something a little bit not too crazy for this. I might use the blue, the purple and the gold. And the colors are nice and syrupy now. You can see that the water's been sitting in there and they're no longer quite so pale. They're coating the brush. Now, because these are watercolors and going on top of an acrylic surface, it's not going to be perfect, but when you press these down, you will get the circle shape. Now, these of course are meant for acrylic paints, not water-based paints, but we'll give it a go and see how it works. Now I'm just flicking the gold on. I don't want to paint it on. And I've just got this on a stamp plate for ease of use. So let me just flip this over. This could go badly. Let's see how it goes. Make sure to press down so that the jelly plate makes good contact, and then lift up. Well, that's interesting. I don't think it's really seeing how opaque this can be. It's making a cool pattern though. Test this one out on the top here. Okay, so the paint is dry and you can see that when applied over the top of that light wash underneath, using the jelly plate, you get some gorgeous unexpected colour combinations like this blue gold. Almost reminds me of lapis. It's so pretty. Some beautiful swirls, some very pale areas when you do the second print, and here on the square section some beautiful patterning combined with some wonderful sort of paint settling. But of course this is not showing the paint at its most opaque because I applied it direct to the jelly plate and then squashed it on top of the other colours. And that is just not as opaque as this paint can go. It's still quite watery because there's not a great deal on the surface. So the next thing I'm going to do is add some additional colours or swirls or mark patterns, something, to see how this can look when painted direct from these palettes using a water brush. Now I've let the water sit on here for quite a while until it's become really thick and syrupy. Thick as this watercolour paint can get before it becomes unusable. So let's make some marks with this. So to start with, I'm just using it to pick out patterns, perhaps add a little bit of form to some of these jelly print images. I'm not going to do it the same on every single one. Now the purple's not quite as thick as the pink yet. It's interesting the way that some colours, even with the same amount of water, take longer for it to soak in. Could just be a matter of how dry the pan was. There was purple already at the top, so I'm adding more purple here. And just like that pink circle, I'm just sort of dabbing it on just so I can get maximum coverage. So I really want to see how opaque this can be. So I've seen how translucent, transparent it can get. Now I'd like to see how dark I can make something. Now the rest of the square was blue, so I'll see if I can go in with a little blue as well. Now that squirt of water, or 2 squirts of water, has been sitting in the pan for about half an hour at this point. But I'm also using a mop brush, which holds a lot of paint and a lot of water. So anytime I've put it into the water bowl and pulled it back out, it's adding a little bit more water. Gotta love inky fingerprints. So I'm going to add some of this in here, extending that square. What I'm going to do with this one is just see if I can flick a few bits of blue into the purple, just for something a little bit different. And then, I don't know, I don't like having sort of just like one dark colour and then leaving it. It just doesn't ever look right to me. That blue is gorgeously opaque. It's just super pretty. colour mixing, sort of a happy accident. Now I've been looking for somewhere to add a little of the green, so I'm just going to add some of this at the top and then just sort of let it flow as it will. Time to add a little gold here. Now I haven't put my water brush back in the pot, so it's a little drier than it would normally be, but that will mean that whatever I pick up here is undiluted as well. Now there's already a lot of gold in this and I don't want to overdo it, but I do want to add just a couple of gold accents. Although I know it's difficult to overdo gold, honestly. Now leaving this to dry means that when I do apply the gold over other colours, it's not going to mingle, it's going to be nice and crisp, which is exactly what I'm after here. Now there's no real rhyme or reason here. I'm not trying to make any particular pattern. I'm just, I suppose you would call it almost meditative journaling. So I'm just picking out something interesting and letting the brush go where it will. I'm not trying to make any specific look. I'm not trying to do anything in particular apart from add colour to a page. So it's quite relaxing because there's no sort of expectations involved. All I'm doing is having a play at the moment. Now I've got a nice patch of gold. I've got some beautiful colours up here. I might let this dry and then continue. Now you'll notice I haven't added any more of the red apart from the initial pale red colour. It's because it's so bright. It's really not like the others. But I suppose just for the sake of my colour swatches, I should add a little bit of red in here as well. Just so I can see and remind myself later how strong a colour this really is. Okay. Now that the paint is dry, you can see that if you let the water sit in the watercolour pan long enough until it gets to that syrupy consistency, you can make it so that it's almost opaque. Now there is quite a variation between the colours. The pink is not as shimmery, it's more of a satin than some of the other colours. The blue is quite striking, as is the purple, and the gold, of course, is the absolute brightest. The red is very, very dark compared to the other colours. The green is also quite lovely, and you can see that the blue and purple, the green and the blue, the gold and anything look amazing together. So I have the basis for my test. So I've tried it wet on wet, quite pale. I've tried layering the colours and you get this beautiful pattern and sort of swirly effect where you can see both together, one over the top of the other. And then I've tried making them more opaque. All of those worked really well, I have to say. I'm quite impressed with the options that it gives, and I will be using these on a future project. But for the moment, I'd like to just do a few small things to finish this off as a page. Alright, so I've got some Dina Wakley paints that I'm going to use to finish this page off. I've got turquoise, magenta and night, and these are matte, so they'll create a really nice contrast with what I've already used. So I'm just going to squirt a little bit of the night onto some scrap paper, then apply the paint directly to the jelly plate, then make some marks by stamping into it, and then stamping off. Might go overlay over the pink again, I think. So I'm just going to rub some of that back, just so it gets a little swipe. Alright, so I'm just going to add a hint of this gorgeous turquoise with a water brush. Because none of this is sealed, this will react with the watercolours underneath. And I'll get some interesting new things going on. At this point I just have to consider where else I'd like that turquoise. It's really brightening things up for me. And I've got this little bit of interesting pattern and texture and depth from the colour here. I'm just going to swipe a little of the turquoise on here, just so it's got a bit of that colour in there as well. And then while the brush is still coloured from that swipe, so it's got a bit of a mixture of the turquoise and the pink, just going to add it down the bottom here, just so it adds something to that little circle down the bottom. Now along that same vein, just going to add some to the pink, not a whole lot. And I really love this area here. It's sort of like a lavendery gold, but this edge is a little boring, so you go it, you know it, a little bit more turquoise. But I don't want to cover up that lavender, so just have to add a little bit. Alright, it's starting to look a little brighter. A little touch here. Now that red is like super strong. For me, the red doesn't really gel with the rest of the colours, but that might just be how I'm looking at it. Don't forget to go over it so that you get several tones. If there's a way to make it more interesting, do it. Okay, so it still needs some darkness. So I really like the way that the night is working out. Turns out I don't think I need the pink. So let me play with some of this night. So I'm still using the same water brush, and I'm just using a bit of scrap paper here, but you could do something more fancy and use a proper palette. And I'm just going to draw in some darker areas, and I'm just going to trace sort of where the colours meet. Can add more and make it a bit darker. Take some colour off the brush and fade it out a bit. And of course, because it's watercolour underneath, it's unsealed, you'll get some funky stuff happening. You might get some colour blending. It's hard to tell. If you want to take off any colour, just pat it with the water brush. Now, not every line has to be thick or blended. It can be fine. If it's not dark enough, add a bit more paint to the brush. And the trick towards the end here is just to keep adding colour until you're happy with it. Oof. Okay, I'm going to have to try that on a later project, because that night mixed with the gold gives this stunning irisy kind of colour. I don't know if I can get any of it onto my project, but oof. Alright, I like the little bit of depth that darkness has added. Starting to make things look more interesting. Now I'm going to add a little bit of mark making with a variety of pens. So I have a white brush pen, a white paint pen, the Jane Davenport pens in gold and in black, and I'm just going to add some doodling and some marks. So we've added a little bit of dark to the dark, added some little sort of swirly bits and some highlights, added some white to the lights and some pattern. I've added just a few swipes up here and just a few little patterns in here. And I think I'm almost happy with it. I think I'd like to add this to the top there just to finish it off. Now sometimes it just helps to sit with things for a moment and see if it needs something extra. And I'm just going to use this beautiful gold glitter pen from Jane Davenport to add the finishing touches, because it's a different gold but still in the same colour palette. It's a different look too, so it's not that sort of metallic of the paint, it's sort of more of a shimmer colour. It's super pretty. Perfect. And I'm going to call my road test finished. So we've tested wet on wet and seen how beautiful and pale and shimmery it can look. Then we've gone and added layer over layer and used the jelly plate to sort of add one watercolour look over another, which is this beautiful, gorgeous patterned section here. You can still see some of my original background in this little section here, this beautiful pale area. And then we've tested the opacity by seeing how dark we can make it by getting those watercolours really heavily syrupy and going over the top of the underneath colours with a much darker, thicker layer, which also works beautifully. And then I've added those acrylic paints over the top without sealing the watercolours, so you get a little bit of blending and a little bit of sort of transitional colours happening. I did wipe this corner with a baby wipe to tape some of that depth off, which left the option available to add some brighter colours in there, which I loved. And then finishing off with a little bit of doodling and mark making, just to see how paint, how colour, how shimmery pens work over the top and play with all of those other colours. Now some things, for example, the Jane Davenport pen on the red, it almost soaks into the watercolour paint, creating a secondary colour. It's that pretty. But it looks gorgeous, and yet when you use it over some other areas, for example, this aqua paint, it's much brighter and you get much more of that glittery effect. I really like the way that you can blend the paint in with these shimmer tones. This is just yum. Honestly, I'm going to call my little road test a success. So I hope you've seen some interesting things with these gem colours and got an idea of how you can use them, which colours are the richest, the opacity level. That was the whole point of my page. So I'll be back with a bit more soon. I might try these techniques on some cards. Could be interesting. I hope you've enjoyed this little road test of the Kuretake Gansai Tambi Gem watercolour set. And of course, you can get them from Lulu Art.